"Get in my wagon," the cowboy growled when he saw the pregnant orc widow struggling alone. He was a cowboy with one grave behind his house and nothing left to lose. She was a pregnant orc widow, chained inside a wrecked prison cart, sinking beneath a flooded river while 3 riflemen watched from the ridge, waiting for the water to finish what they didn't want their own hands to do. Harris Rourke didn't know her name. He didn't know she was a chief's widow, or that the child beneath her torn armor was an heir powerful enough to start a war. All he knew was a voice screaming for help under the current, and a choice no decent man could walk away from, so he didn't walk away. He waded into that river with bullets cutting the water around him, and when he pulled her out, he pulled out more than a stranger. He pulled out a secret that would burn down marshals, war captains, and a peace council built on lies. This is the story of a man who chose a drowning woman over his own safety, and a widow who had learned that trust gets people killed, right up until it didn't. Get in the wagon. This ride doesn't stop at the riverbank. Follow OrcBond Saga. Now, the next chapter drops before you're ready for it. The hand vanished beneath. The flood before Harris Rourke understood. It belonged to a woman. He had been guiding his wagon across the red Willow Ford when a broken wheel spun past him, followed by a length of chain and a blood-darkened cloak. His mare reared. The wagon lurched. Then a voice rose from the brown water below the crossing. "Please!" An overturned prison cart had wedged between 2 boulders downstream. One side was breaking apart beneath the current. A green-skinned arm thrust through the shattered rails, fingers clawing for air. 3 riders appeared on the ridge behind the river, black dusters, split-horn badges, rifles across their saddles. They were not riding toward the wreck to help. One raised his weapon and fired into the cart. Harris drew his revolver and shot the dead branch above them loose, forcing their horses to rear, then ran into the river. The cold hit like a kick to the chest. His boots slid over stones. The current dragged at his knees, then his thighs. "Hold on." A face broke the surface between the cart rails, unmistakably orc. Deep green skin, white lower tusks, black hair tangled around a broad, striking face, sharpened by pain. Her amber eyes fixed on him with the furious disbelief of someone who had expected death, but not rescue. "My leg!" she gasped. Pinned! A black iron shackle circled her wrist, chained to an axle beneath the water. Someone had locked her into the wreck on purpose. Another bullet struck beside Harris's head. Who are they? Men who will kill the child before they let me reach Ashfang land. Only then did Harris see the curve beneath her torn leather armor. How far? 7 months. He grabbed the chain, too thick to break, no visible lock. "Key!" One of them carries it. She caught his shirt. "Leave me." "No. They will shoot you. They already tried. You do not know me. You're drowning." "Seems enough for today." He pulled his hatchet and struck the axle pin. The current slammed him into the wreck. She caught him before he went under. "Again," she ordered, and he struck again. A rider reached the bank and aimed. She saw him first and shoved Harris beneath the surface as the shot passed where his skull had been. Underwater, he wedged the hatchet into the split pin and twisted with both hands until the axle broke. The river took them. He surfaced with her arm around his neck, the current dragging them toward jagged rocks. She was too heavy for him to hold and too weak to swim. One hand still pressed over her belly. "Let go," she choked. "No, you will drown, then—" "Kick! My leg is injured. Use the other one." They struck a submerged shelf and lost each other for one terrible second before he dove and found her by the chain. Together they fought toward the shallows, and Harris dragged her by the shoulders until the mud held her weight. The riders were already crossing upstream. He brought the wagon close. She tried to stand. Her right leg folded beneath her. "Do not touch me," she warned. Harris didn't argue with her. He didn't reason or plead or waste breath on kindness the moment couldn't afford. He looked at the blood running down her leg, the shackle scar circling her wrist, the riders already turning their horses toward the crossing. And something low and certain rose up in his chest that had nothing to do with manners. "Get in my wagon," he growled. The words scraped out of him, rough as gravel. Not a request, not even close to one. And for 1 second, the anger in it wasn't at her at all. It was at every man on that ridge who decided her life was theirs to spend. That was not a request. I noticed. You speak to orc commanders that way often? Only the ones bleeding into my river. It is not your river. Runs through my land. Then your river is poorly behaved. A laugh nearly escaped him. The first he'd allowed himself in longer than he could remember. Hooves struck the ford behind them. Choose fast. If you betray me, cowboy, I will kill you before they do. Seems fair. She took his hand. He helped her into the wagon, covered her with a horse blanket, and snapped the reins as the first bullet tore through the seat beside him. From the water, a rider shouted a name that made her hand close around his wrist. Rourke, hand over the widow. You said you did not know them, she said. I don't. But they know me. They know me too, Harris said, and drove into the trees. He didn't look back at the ford. He'd learned a long time ago that looking back at a thing you couldn't change only slowed the horse pulling you away from it. Anna had taught him that without meaning to, in the year it took her to die by inches. He wasn't going to learn the lesson twice. Beside him, the woman he'd pulled from the river pressed one hand flat over her belly and said nothing at all, and that silence told him more than her knife ever could. Harris left the road before sunset, cutting through a dry creek bed and along a cattle trail too narrow for riders to follow at speed. Twice he glimpsed black dusters through the pines before losing them in the failing light. At dusk he turned the wagon into an old service shed hidden behind mesquite near a collapsed mine, and pulled rotting boards across the entrance. In the dim light he saw the extent of her injuries: a grazed shoulder, a swollen ankle, and an older wound at her side that had reopened and gone the color of a bruise that would not heal. The shackle still circled her wrist, a broken length of chain hanging from it like something that hadn't finished its sentence. What's your name? Why, so I know what to call you while you refuse sensible help. Savannah, full name. Savannah is enough for a man I met an hour ago. She drew a knife from her boot and stopped it beneath his chin before he'd finished reaching for her ankle. Ask before touching me. I was going to. You were already moving. I move when I'm thinking. Bad habit, a dangerous one. So is holding a knife on the only man hiding you tonight. She held the blade a moment longer, reading something in his face, then lowered it. Then earned the trust, instead of asking for it. He worked in silence after that, sagebrush ground with spirits for the wound, a careful wrap for the ankle. She watched every motion of his hands like a woman cataloguing weapons. You've done this before, more than I wanted to. A wife. His hands didn't stop moving, but something in his jaw did. Once dead, yes, a child. A son, Eli, he went first. He tied off the bandage. You ask questions. Like a woman used to getting answers. I ask questions like a woman who has learned that the men who avoid them are the ones worth watching. Then watch this one and learn something useful. I don't avoid questions. I just don't hand out the answers for free, same as you don't hand out that knife. She studied him a moment longer than the joke deserved, as if weighing whether the bitterness under it was old or fresh. It was both. He'd buried it so many times it had learned to grow back overnight, like weeds along a fence line nobody bothered to mend anymore. Outside, a horse moved through brush, too close. Rourke! The voice belonged to a man Harris had once called a friend. You don't know what she is. Gideon Shaw, deputy marshal of Bell's Crossing. Come out, Gideon called. She murdered an Ashfang chief and stole his heir. Is that true? Harris asked her low. No! The word came out wounded rather than defensive, and that was what made him believe it more than any oath could have. He is carrying a child that could start a war. Gideon shouted. Hand her over and no harm comes to you. You told me the child would be killed, Savannah whispered. He will, Gideon called back as if he'd heard. Your husband was the chief. Harris asked her. Yes. Did you kill him? No, he was poisoned. His war captain blamed me. Gideon Shaw sold me to men who intended to force a confession before the child was born. She looked at Harris with something between challenge and exhaustion. "Believe that or don't. I'm done convincing strangers tonight." Harris drew his revolver and crawled to the rear gap instead of answering. Because the honest answer was that he didn't fully believe her. Not yet, and he needed a moment where his face wouldn't give that away. He cut 2 saddle straps in the dark, slapped the horses, fired once into the air. The riders shouted and scattered after their spooked animals. When he came back inside, her knife was still in her hand. But she hadn't moved. "You could have run," he said. "You had the wagon. You could have taken it. You had the horse." A pause. "Trust is not a thing I hand to a man because he saved my life once, Cowboy. My husband trusted the wrong people and it killed him. Then I'll earn it the slow way. That is the only way it is worth having." Before they left, she touched his sleeve, the first time she had reached for him rather than the other way around. Harris. His name, for the first time, in her mouth. "If Gideon knew where to find you." "Someone told him you crossed the ford. No one saw me." Someone did. From the trees came the metallic click of a rifle being cocked. Harris didn't reach for his gun first. He reached for her, pulling her low behind the wagon wheel with a grip that left no room for her usual argument. And the sound that came out of him this time wasn't words at all, just a low, warning growl aimed at the dark, the same animal certainty that had put him in the river hours before. Some instincts didn't need permission to answer for him. Harris fired toward the sound. The answering shot shattered the lantern. 2 shooters, Savannah whispered, pulling him down behind the wheel. One breathes through his mouth. "How can you tell that in the dark?" "The same way I know you're favoring your left arm." I listen. A flame touched the front of the shed. They dropped through a rear gap into a wash and rode double through the darkness on Harris's mare. Savannah's arm, rigid around his waist at first. Then as the trail steepened, her whole body pressed against his back, every jolt catching in her breath. They reached Harris's ranch before dawn, a house beneath cottonwoods. A barn, a windmill, and one grave on the rise behind it, marked by 2 names on the same stone. Savannah saw it as he helped her down. "You buried them together." They hated being apart. Inside, the house carried the stillness of a place kept functional rather than lived in. 1 cup by the basin, 1 chair angled toward the hearth. A child's red scarf folded on a shelf that no one had moved in years. "The forge is in the barn," he said. "For the shackle. You should sleep first. So should you. I cannot. With this around my wrist. Then neither can I. In the barn, heating the iron over coals, he asked, "Who was your husband?" "Ardan." She said the name like it still cost her something. "He became chief at 29. Believed trade with humans would end the border raids. Did it? For 3 years. Then silver was found beneath Red Mesa, and men wanted the land, and my clans wanted the passes. And Ardan tried to build a council out of people who'd rather have a war." His war captain disagreed. "Torren believes fear is wisdom." "Sometimes it is." She watched the iron glow. "I have a brother by marriage too, in a manner of speaking. Ardan's younger brother, Jonah's kind, left the territory years back over a grudge neither side will name honestly. If Ardan trusted anyone outside the clan, it was men like that, stubborn, absent when it mattered." Harris said nothing. Filing the detail away without knowing yet why it would matter, he struck the heated shackle. Iron rang, and it split. "You're free." "No," she said. "Only unchained." He gave her the bedroom and slept on the floor by the hearth. Near sunrise, he woke to steel at his throat. Savannah above him, knife in hand, eyes wild with a nightmare that hadn't ended yet. "Where is Ardan?" "Savannah. Where did you take him?" "He's dead." Her face broke. For 1 unguarded second, she was not a commander or a fugitive, only a widow waking into the worst moment of remembering, over and over, every night. The knife fell. "I could have killed you, but you didn't." I drew blood. She touched the thin line beneath his jaw. "I've had worse from shaving." He set the knife on the table, within her reach, and walked away from it. "Why give it back?" she asked. Because trust isn't trust if I hide all the sharp things. Something shifted between them. Not affection yet. Not safety, but recognition. Two people who knew exactly what it was to wake and lose the dead again. A knock struck the door. Harris Rourke, open up before your guest bleeds to death. Only one person in Bell's Crossing spoke to him like that. His dead wife's sister had found them. Ruth Bell came in carrying a medical bag and a shotgun. 47, silver threading her dark hair. The confidence of a woman who'd delivered half the territory and buried too much of the other half. Orc, she said, looking at Savannah. Human. Savannah returned, pregnant, observant, bleeding, persistent. A flicker of something almost like respect passed between them. Ruth cut away the bandage at Savannah's side. The skin had gone nearly black. She smelled the wound, touched her tongue to the bandage's clean edge, and spat into the fire. Gravebloom. Grows only in Ashfang burial ground. Then someone close to my husband wanted me weak, not dead, Savannah said. A dead pregnant widow is a martyr, Ruth said. A widow who gives birth and then appears to murder the child is something far more useful to whoever wants war. They mean to frame me. Likely. Gideon, said I killed Ardan. Gideon's been taking money from the Red Mesa Company. I know because Anna knew. Ruth pulled a folded letter from her bag. I found this among her things after the funeral. I hated you for surviving her, Harris. I kept this out of spite as much as grief. I'm sorry for both, Harris read Anna's hand. If anything happens to me, do not trust Gideon Shaw. Eli's death was an accident. Mine may not be. The letters swam for a second before his eyes settled. 6 years, he'd told himself. Anna's decline was just grief eating a body from the inside out. The way it had nearly eaten him too. 6 years, he'd let that explanation sit comfortable in his chest because the alternative meant someone had taken her from him on purpose. And he hadn't seen it, hadn't fought for her the way he'd fought that river for a stranger in one afternoon. She was poisoned. I don't know. But she wasted the same way this wound is trying to waste her. Ruth nodded at Savannah. Someone at that company doctor's table has been at this for a long time. Ruth mixed an antidote of charcoal, bitterroot, and powdered shell. Savannah drank until the child inside her moved, hard enough that her breath caught. Harris reached instinctively and stopped. Himself. She took his hand and pressed it to the curve, beneath her ribs before he could pull back. He doesn't move for strangers, she said. You said he did. Ardan believed in a son. What do you believe? A daughter. She survived poison, chains, a river, and your horse's complaints. Only a daughter is that stubborn. Ruth cleared her throat loudly and found something urgent to do with a bottle. I can slow the poison, Ruth said. I can't cure it without fresh moonroot. It only grows past Red Mesa. The company controls that ground, Savannah said. And Gideon controls the road, said Harris. Then we take neither, said Harris, folding Anna's letter into his coat. There's a canyon road nobody's used since the flood 2 years back. Before Ruth left to spread word that Harris had ridden south alone, she caught his arm. There's one more line in Anna's letter at the bottom. The company isn't after the ranches. They're searching for something buried beneath the Ashfang graves. The storm caught them before the canyon and drove them into a line shack. Roof sagging, one wall admitting a steady blade of cold air. Ruth turned back for medicine. That left Harris and Savannah with one bedroll, one dry blanket, and a silence neither of them knew how to cross. You're angry, she said. As he changed her bandage. At Ruth, at your wife. He didn't answer for a moment. Anna hid danger from me. Right up until it killed her, maybe. Ardan did the same. Near the end, he stopped drinking wine unless I poured it myself. Dismissed servants. Moved his journals somewhere I never found. He suspected poison, yes, but never told you. He believed I already carried too much. Border guard. Council negotiations. His child. His wife. A dry breath. That last one turned out to be the hardest post to hold. Rain hammered the roof. The fire weakened. Harris spread the blanket over the bedroll and told her to take it. She told him his lips had gone blue, which was true. And a minute later, the blanket landed over his face anyway. Orc custom requires shared warmth when shelter is poor, she said. That sounds convenient. It's ancient. How ancient? I invented it 4 seconds ago. They lay beneath it 6 careful inches apart, until her shoulder found his chest, without either of them deciding it should. Ardan snored. She said into the dark. Anna stole every blanket in the house. Ardan did both, and argued with me in front of the whole war council the week we met. That's what won me over. He was the only man who thought respect didn't require agreement. What were you arguing about? Whether to burn 3 human ranches after a border killing. I wanted retaliation. He said vengeance was a debt inherited by children who never borrowed it. He sounds like he was right. He was irritatingly right. Often, then quieter. The last thing he asked me was whether I'd eaten. He was dying, and he was worried about supper. That sounds like love. It felt like abandonment for a while. Now it just sounds like him. Her hand found his beneath the blanket. Tell me about Anna. She sang badly, loudly, especially when I was trying to work. Did you tell her? Every day, and she only got louder. Eli had her voice then. He sang to the calves. No living creature enjoyed it, but he never once noticed. For the first time, her laugh was real, small and startled out of her, gone almost before it landed. Then her hand tightened. Still alive? He asked, regrettably. A beat. That is not what I meant to say. I know. At dawn, hoofbeats surrounded the shack, and Gideon Shaw's voice cut through the rain. Harris, step outside. I have a warrant for the murder of your wife. Harris stood before she could stop him. Stay hidden, he said. He will search the shack. He, Harris repeated. You've been saying she for Gideon since the river. A slip. He will search badly regardless. A flicker of dark humor. Gone as fast as it came. Outside, 6 mounted deputies waited in the rain. Gideon at their center, grey-eyed, clean-shaven. The split-horn badge pinned crooked on a coat he'd once worn to carry Eli's coffin beside Harris. You're arresting me for Anna's murder now. Ruth Bell says Anna suspected you. Ruth said no such thing, and you know it. She says many things when frightened enough. They weren't here because they believed him guilty. They were here because Gideon had the paper and the badge, and paper made men brave. Where's the orc? Gideon asked. What orc? You always were a poor liar, Harris. And you were always a man who mistook a badge for a spine. Harris stepped between Gideon and the door without deciding to. The same low growl rising in his chest that had put him in the river. Not a threat exactly. Just a warning from somewhere older than manners that whatever Gideon wanted, he'd have to go through Harris first. She's not yours to take. Harris drew and shot the badge clean off Gideon's coat before the man could finish reaching for his rifle. The deputies scattered for cover, and then Savannah came through the rear window on one of their own horses, struck the nearest man with the flat of her blade, and had a rifle trained. On Gideon before he'd found his feet. Tell them to lower their weapons. You should be dead. I've disappointed better men than... You don't understand what that child will cause. Then explain it to me slowly, since you people are so fond of ledgers and terms. War, Gideon said. The Red Mesa Company found something beneath the Ashfang burial ground. Not silver, ironstone, enough to arm every force west of the plains. Your husband refused them access. Someone above the company wanted that refusal gone. Someone, Savannah said. You mean a name, and you're protecting it. Gideon's jaw worked, and for one moment something like shame crossed his face, before the badge-shaped habit of authority closed over it again. I carry messages. That's all I've ever done. You chained a pregnant widow into a river cart. That's more than messages, he didn't answer. Harris saw it then, not a monster exactly, but a man who'd let order and necessity stand in for a conscience so long he'd forgotten the difference. We're taking him, Harris said. He'll slow us. He's the only proof we have that this goes higher than Torren's grief. Behind them, war horns sounded across the ridge. Torren had found the road. They rode with Gideon bound across a spare saddle. Torren's riders closing from one side, silver badge riders from the other, until the only path left was the old Ashfang burial road cut into the canyon wall. white bones strung on cords overhead, singing low notes in the wind. "The dead sing here," Savannah said. "So travelers remember they're watched. Bones can't watch. Then insult them freely and see what happens." Halfway through, Harris's wounded arm bled through its bandage. "You need to stop. So do the men behind us. You'll fall. Tie me to the saddle." Then, that was a joke. Mostly, they reached a stone bridge no wider than a wagon board, spanning a dry riverbed. Harris crossed first with the mare. Savannah followed, leading Gideon's horse, and Gideon slipped, hanging by his bound wrists over the drop. "Leave him," she shouted, and meant it for one raw second. The man who'd chained her, who'd helped hunt her unborn child. Then she wrapped the rope around her forearm and pulled anyway, screaming at the horse to hold, until Harris ran back and hauled Gideon up by the coat with his good arm. For a moment all three of them lay tangled on the narrow stone, breathing hard, and Harris understood something about her then that no amount of questioning could have taught him. Savannah didn't save people because it was safe or wise or even kind. She saved them because the alternative, becoming a woman who let a man fall just to prove a point, cost more than her pride could afford, even now, even for Gideon. "Why?" Gideon asked, stunned. "Because I won't let you turn me into the thing you need me to be, to feel right about what you did," she said. On the far side, Torren waited, massive even for an orc, silver sheathing one tusk. 20 years beside Ardan, written into every scar on him. "Savannah, come home. You poisoned my husband. I spared him from watching everything he built collapse. Ardan trusted you. I loved him. That's why I couldn't watch him surrender to us, one negotiation at a time." Torren's voice cracked on the word loved, and it was the crack more than the confession that told Harris this man believed every word of his own justification. "Humans crossed the mesa," Torren said. "Opened our graves. Call it law." Odin still asked for time. "Time is the gift cowards give their enemies," Harris said. "Or so I've been told twice tonight by men who killed people they claimed to love. You're the cowboy, apparently. The child isn't yours. Walk away." Harris looked at Savannah. Rain dried in her hair, shackle scars circling her wrist, one hand resting over what Ardan had left behind. "No, you love her." The question landed too early and too exact. He couldn't answer honestly without changing everything between them. And he couldn't lie without it costing something worse. "I'm getting there," he said, and meant it as much as anything he'd ever said. Torren raised his rifle, and an arrow struck it from his hand. From the rim, Ruth Bell called down, "Told you I'd gather medicine," and beside her stood a lean, sun-browned man Harris hadn't seen in 12 years. Jonah Rourke came down the slope, wearing a cavalry coat with the insignia stripped off. "You look terrible," he told Harris. "You look alive. Been a while for both." This reunion is going well. They'd parted after Eli's death. Jonah blaming Harris for letting grief swallow the ranch. Harris blaming Jonah for leaving Anna to grieve alone. Neither of them had the time now to relitigate it properly. And both seemed almost relieved by that. "We can hate each other after we survive this," Harris said. "Generous of you." Savannah studied him with open curiosity. Ardan's brother left the same way. "After the wedding," Jonah's eyes flicked to her belly, then to the shackle scars on her wrist, and something in his face sobered fast. "Then I know exactly what kind of coward runs from a thing like that. I came from the same, different family." "Good. Now we should leave before the canyon fills with bullets," Ruth said, and led them through a smuggler's cut while ranchers held the pass behind them. At an abandoned mission that night, Jonah laid it out. He'd joined the territorial survey after leaving. Red Mesa had hired the survey crew to mark claims. They'd found tunnels beneath the burial ground. "Not dug yet," he said. Ardan stopped them. Then he died, and I found records. Dr. Venn supplied a Gravebloom to Torren and a sleeping draft to Gideon both. On the same company ledger. "Venn," Gideon said quietly from against the wall. The first thing he'd said since the bridge. "He answers to someone above the company manager. The Western Council mark is on those payments. Governors, clan elders, merchants, a body built to..." Prevent border wars, then someone inside the peace itself is the one. Arranging the killing, Savannah said. Ruth treated Harris's arm while Savannah watched from a few feet away, arms crossed. Unreadable. You should sleep, Harris said to her. So should you. I slept in the saddle. You were unconscious. That's not the same thing, and you know it. He let a silence sit before he said, You watched me and Jonah like you were deciding something. I was. She looked toward the fire, where Jonah spoke low with Ruth. He left his family the way I nearly left mine. If I'm honest, about the year after Ardan died, buried under duty, until there's nothing human left to come back to. Did you forgive him? Jonah, I mean, for orcs generally. For leaving? No. To understand why a person runs, yes, that much I have. Harris closed his fingers around hers. You don't have to lose him to honor what you already lost. Is that what you're doing? With me, I don't know yet, he admitted. And it was the truest thing either of them had said all night. Blood spread beneath Gideon before anyone noticed the blade had found him. Someone had cut his bonds only to open a wound with a narrow black blade, then vanished into the dark. Jonah stood in the doorway holding a torch high. That's Ashfang steel. Guard issue. Someone in their own camp answered the enemy. They've made it this far only to find the knife was already inside their circle. Stay with OrcBond, Saga. The traitor's name is 1 chapter away. Ruth packed the wound and forced willow tincture past Gideon's teeth while he drifted between. Consciousness and delirium missed the heart, Ruth said. Either the killer was interrupted or he wanted Gideon silenced slowly, as a message. Core, Gideon managed before his eyes closed again. Elder Core, ask. The boy turned out to be Cade, a young Ashfang warrior who joined Ruth's ranchers back at the canyon and helped carry Savannah when she could no longer sit a horse. Savannah had trusted him enough to sleep an arm's length from him. Her knife was in her hand before Jonah finished naming him a suspect. I didn't stab him, Cade said. Your palms raised. Your blade is missing, Jonah said. Core's men took it when they took my sister. His sister, Nessa, had been arrested for speaking against the mining agreement. Core had promised her release if Cade reported where Savannah's party was headed each night. You've been leading them to us since the canyon, Savannah said. It wasn't a question. Yes, he didn't flinch from it. I told myself I hadn't chosen yet, that reporting wasn't the same as betraying. I was wrong, and Gideon nearly died for the lie I told myself. Give me one reason not to kill you where you kneel. I don't have one that will satisfy you tonight, Cade said. Only that my sister would tell me to stop using her life as permission to become a man she'd hate. I heard her say it in my head 3 times tonight and did it anyway. Until now. Harris watched Savannah's grip on the knife, not softening exactly, but shifting. The way a woman's hand shifts when the target in front of her has stopped being simple. You lied to a widow carrying a murdered chief's child, she said. And you want mercy because your reason was love. I want nothing, Cade said. I only wanted you to know before you decided, so the decision is honest at least. What would Core do with us if Cade led him here? He needs the child publicly acknowledged before he kills it, Cade said. A dead pregnant widow is a martyr. A widow who births an heir and then appears to murder the child herself is a war he can point at afterward and call justified. Then we don't let him have his ceremony, Harris said, at the fork ahead, left to the river. Right to the old burial road. Cade said the burial road was dangerous but empty. Core's men would expect the river. How do we know that isn't the same trap dressed differently? Savannah asked. You don't, Cade said. You only have my word, and I've already told you what that's worth tonight. She studied him a long moment, then sheathed the knife. Trust given where it's least safe is still trust. Lead. The tunnel opened above Red Mesa. Below, the burial ground glowed with hundreds of lanterns. Ashfang elders gathered for Ardan's remembrance, and beside the gathering, bound to a post, Cade's sister, Core, had assembled every witness he needed for a murder he intended to call justice. They hid above the valley in a shepherd's barn, while Jonah pushed for an immediate strike and Harris spread survey maps across a crate. Instead, Core has 300 warriors, Jonah said. We have 40 ranches. Then we have 40 funerals, unless we're smart about it, Harris said. The mine tunnels run under the ceremonial ground. Most collapsed, one didn't. If I can reach my sister at the guard change, Cade said, I can free her and bring the elders who still trust me to the tunnel entrance. They won't follow you, Savannah said. Not after tonight. They'll follow this. She removed Ardan's black iron ring and worked a seam along the band that Harris hadn't noticed until she opened it. Inside, in handwriting she clearly knew by heart, if I die before my child is born, trust Savannah. If Savannah is accused, trust the man who stands beside her when standing there costs him everything. He knew, Harris said. He suspected. Enough to leave a door open for someone he'd never meet. She closed the ring gently, the way people close things that used to be a whole conversation. He didn't bless us, Harris. He blessed trust in whatever shape it survived him. I don't think he cared what it looked like, only that it existed. Cade took the ring and left for the platform. Harris found Savannah behind the barn afterward, watching the lanterns below like a woman counting. The cost of a decision already made. You should eat, he said. I cannot. The child can. That argument grows. Tiresome. It remains effective. She ate the bread he handed her slowly. Ardan taught me a dance before our wedding. Poorly timed thought. That's why I remember it now. And not at any easier hour. You want to dance here? I want to know whether orc custom is kinder to feet than yours. I have one good arm. I have one good leg. An elegant pair of fools. He let her lead, 3 steps forward, 1 back, a turn. The baby kicked hard between them at the turn, and neither of them pretended not to notice. Daughter, Harris said, you've decided. She interrupts a dance mid-turn. Has to be yours. I don't want to replace him, Savannah said, quieter now. You can't. I know. I don't want to replace Anna either. You can't do that either. Then what is this? Building something that doesn't require the dead to disappear to make room for it, Harris said. I'm afraid the only reason I need you tonight is because you're hunted and the night is long. Then survive until it isn't long anymore, and we'll find out together. She didn't kiss him. She rested her forehead against his shoulder instead, and that somehow was more. You're shaking, he said. I'm always shaking. You've simply gotten close enough to feel it now. Her hand found the front of his shirt and held on, not gripping, just resting there like she needed proof he was still breathing under it. Ardan used to say fear and love felt the same in the chest, and the only way to tell them apart was watching what you did next. I ran from one and toward the other my whole life and never once got the two confused until tonight. Which is this? I haven't decided. Ask me again if we survive the sunrise. 3 bell strikes echoed up from the valley. Then a rifle fired. The barn doors burst inward. Jonah, blood on his shirt, shouting the Corps already knew exactly where they were. Corps' men hit from both sides at once. Harris overturned a crate for cover. Savannah drew Ardan's sword, carried and unused since the river, refusing it until tonight, because using it too early would have made her exactly what Corps wanted the elders to see. Pregnancy slowed her. The poison had left her weaker than she'd admit. But experience remained, and the narrow barn worked against the larger numbers better than open ground would have. A lantern fell into hay. Flames climbed the wall. They went out through the cattle gate toward the mine, with the barn burning behind them. Cade went down first, an arrow taking him through the back as he half-carried his freed sister uphill. Harris caught Nessa before she could fall too. I'll get him, he said. Meaning Cade. You said I always arrived late, Savannah called after him. Already moving to cover his run, he reached Cade under arrow fire, hauled him toward the tunnel with Jonah covering the rear, and got him inside before the hillside was fully surrounded. It wasn't enough. Cade's breathing had already gone shallow and wet. I'm sorry, he told Nessa. For what? For every choice I called love, because I was too afraid to call it fear instead. You came back at the end. That's what I'll tell them. Don't let Corps use the eastern shaft. It opens beneath the elders themselves. His hand found his sisters. Show them when it's time. Don't let my mistake be the last thing they remember of me." Nessa closed his eyes and stood, dry-faced, in the way of someone who would grieve later because there wasn't room for it now. "Show me the eastern shaft." In the central chamber, Gideon, conscious again, pale, walking on will alone, stopped them before the final passage. "Kor will offer terms before he strikes," he said. "He needs witnesses who will believe he's reasonable. It's how he's always worked. I learned the method from watching him work it on me. What do you believe now?" Harris asked him. "That law without truth is just a clean uniform over a dirty hand. Mine's been dirty a long while." He unpinned what remained of his badge and pressed it into Harris's hand. "Take this to the territorial judge. Tell them Marshal Shaw died exposing Kor, not chasing an orc widow. Give it yourself. You're still breathing. Not for much longer. And not where I need to be." He turned to the iron door behind them, already swinging it shut. "I chained you to a wrecked cart because I believed your child was a war waiting to be born. I was a coward who called it caution. Let me be something else at the end, if nothing else." The bar dropped from the far side. Gunfire erupted beyond the door almost. Immediately, Gideon, "Climb," he called. "Through the iron. There's no going back for either of us now." Gideon Shaw died. Buying the minutes he'd once stolen from her, Savannah rose through the center of Ardan's memorial platform into a ring of lanterns, and the valley went silent, the way a held breath goes silent. Elder Kor stood beside Ardan's memorial stone, old, thin, dressed in mourning white, carrying the dignity of a grandfather at a graveside rather than the architect of everything that had led here. "Savannah, you should have come to me. You sent chains to protect the child from Tauren. You made Tauren what he is." He loved the clan. Kor's calm never broke. So did Ardan. Ardan simply loved possibility more than survival. And possibility doesn't feed children. Harris climbed up behind her with Jonah. "Ruth and Nessa," Gideon's badge held plain in his hand. "Where is Marshal Shaw?" Kor asked, seeing it. "Dead. Buying you this conversation. Another life spent in chaos. Spent on your men," Harris said. "Same as Cade, same as Anna Rourke, same as Ardan." Kor turned to the gathered elders. "Do you see it? Human weapons under our graves. A cowboy beside our chief's widow. This is the future Ardan invited on all of us." "No," Savannah said. "This is the fear you built brick by brick out of every man's grief you could reach." She held up Ardan's ring, Cade's blood still on the band. "A husband's trust isn't evidence." "No," Jonah said, stepping forward with a fold of paper. "These are. Payments, ledgers, all bearing the Crowned Eye Council mark. Necessary funds during an unstable time. That's what you called them. Dr. Ven's confession names you outright. 2 ranchers dragged Ven from the tunnel behind them, bound and shaking, and his composure broke the moment his eyes found Kor's. "You promised protection," Ven said. "Even if true," Kor said, unmoved. "Ask why. Red Mesa is starving. Settlements grow. Hunting grounds shrink. Ironstone could fund schools, roads, wells. And Ardan would have left that wealth beneath dead bones while living children went hungry, because tradition mattered more to him than the living." "You could have argued that before the council," Savannah said. "I did. Law moves at the speed of men who are already fed. Mine don't have that luxury. You could have refused murder and watched a war come unprepared instead of on my terms." His voice finally sharpened. "Your child will be loved, and that love will become a banner, and every grievance in this territory will gather beneath it. Some men will answer that banner with rifles. Thousands will die under a flag your daughter never asked to carry. Then help us stop that instead of causing it. You still believe people want peace more than they want to win," Kor said, and drew a pistol from beneath his mourning robe. Harris saw the barrel move before anyone else did. He didn't think about it, didn't weigh the odds or count the distance. He simply moved. The same low growl tearing out of him that had first sent him wading into a flooded river for a stranger, and put his own body between the gun and the woman he'd once ordered, into his wagon like she belonged. There, the shot took Harris below the collarbone. Before anyone could move, for 1 second the world made no sound at all. Then, Jonah's return shot cracked out, and everything came back at once. Savannah's hand gripping Harris's, terror shaking loose beneath the commander's mask she'd worn all night. "You stood in front of me." He had poor aim, Harris managed. "Mostly. Do not joke, it wasn't one." Ruth pressed cloth hard against the wound. "The ball's still in there." The child moved, hard, inside Savannah. Too hard, too early. The shock of the shot tearing something loose that should have waited weeks longer. "No," Savannah said. "Not now." Around them, the funeral ground teetered on the edge of open war. Corps' remaining loyalists shouting the evidence was forged, ranchers raising rifles, Ashfang warriors closing around Savannah in a ring that could have meant protection or execution, depending on which way the next minute broke. "What do we do?" she asked Harris, low, fierce. "Stop looking at me like I'm already dead. You always were controlling. Runs in whatever family I've got left. I can't leave you. You have to. Both men who loved you would tell you the same. Go to your daughter." The words broke something in her face that the knife at his throat mourning hadn't managed. Ruth and Jonah carried Harris down into the chamber beneath the platform. Nessa half-carried Savannah, labor tearing through her faster than anyone could slow. Above, Oric, an elder still loyal to Ardan's memory, arrived with riders in time to face down Corps' remaining guard. Torren, brought forward in chains, watched Cor bound at last beside Ardan's memorial stone. And something in his certainty finally gave way. "You used me," Torren said. "I gave your courage direction. You gave my grief a weapon and called it loyalty." Torren ordered his warriors to stand down. The war corps had spent a year, building collapsing because one grieving man finally admitted an understandable motive doesn't excuse an unforgivable choice. Below, in the chamber, 2 battles ran side by side. On one side, Ruth's hands worked over Harris's chest, hunting the bullet, Jonah holding him still. On the other hand, Savannah gripped Nessa's shoulders and brought Ardan's daughter into the world on the stone floor of her husband's own memorial ground. The baby didn't cry. "Why isn't she?" "Make her angry," Harris rasped from across the chamber, blood in his mouth. "Her mother survives by anger. Try that first." Savannah took the child and spoke low against the small, still ear. "Your father fought for peace and paid for it. Your other fool got himself shot before he'd even met you properly. You do not get to leave me holding both their unfinished stories at once. Breathe!" The baby gasped and cried, and the whole chamber seemed to exhale with her. Across the room, though, Ruth's hands were still pressed flat against Harris's chest, and the blood would not stop. When Harris woke, he was in a ceremonial chamber carved beneath the mesa, lanterns burning low along the walls. And it took him a long moment to believe any of it. The river, the canyon. The shot hadn't been feverish. Then a baby cried in the next room. And he knew it hadn't. "How long?" he asked. When Ruth came to check the wound, 6 days. "You enjoy frightening healers apparently on a schedule." Savannah. "Alive, stubborn, currently teaching your daughter to hate her Uncle Jonah, who deserves it for the windmill. The bullet damaged the artery," Ruth told him plainly, "because she'd never once softened the truth for him. I repaired what I could. You may recover fully. You may also stand too fast next spring and not make it to the floor. I can't promise which. So, no cattle work. You may pet one. Carefully under supervision." Savannah came in as Ruth left. The baby against her chest, dark hair loose. Exhaustion and something like peace sitting together in her face for the first time since the river. "You're awake." "Both of you stay horizontal, or I poison you myself," Ruth called from the hall. Not looking back, Savannah sat beside him. "Cor will stand trial." Torren confessed everything before the elders. "The company claims it knew nothing, of course." "Of course. The elders want me to lead in Liora's place until she's grown. Do you want that? I want to sleep for a year, and after that I want to find out who I am when no one's hunting me." She looked down at the sleeping child. "I named her Liora. Ardan would have chosen it, light returning after fire. You don't want my name in hers?" "No," a small, honest smile. "She already carries what you gave her without needing the word for it." "What's that?" "Terrible timing." She interrupted a dance and a funeral both, and she isn't sorry about either. So, the elders. A chief may marry outside the clan with council approval. Do we need it? For whatever this becomes, you nearly died twice in 6 weeks. This is a poor time to make promises. I was weak the day I walked into that river too. Never stopped me before. I loved Ardan, she said. I still love him. I don't want our daughter to be taught that loving you means her father mattered less. Then we won't teach her that. We'll teach her the heart doesn't bury one love to make room for the next one. It just makes room. I don't want his throne or his name or his place inside you, Harris said. I want you, whatever's left after all of it. She rested her forehead against his. Careful of the wound, tusks brushing his lip before the kiss found them both properly gentle. Because everything else hurt, and honest. Because neither of them had the strength left to make it anything less. Liora made an offended sound between them. She objects, Savannah said. She's Ashfang. It's cultural. It lasted about 4 seconds before Oric entered with the news that Kor had escaped his chains. A company guard had cut him loose and was already riding for fort. Mercy to reach the army first with a story about Ashfang rebels and murdered officials. The peace they'd bled for wasn't finished yet. They rode out before dawn. Harris in the wagon on Ruth's strict order. Savannah beside him with Liora wrapped against her chest. Jonah driving. Oric and 20 riders at their back. Along the road, they found what Kor had left behind him, like breadcrumbs meant to be discovered. Murdered couriers wearing Ashfang arrows. A burned homestead the surviving farmer swore orcs had attacked, until Nessa found company cavalry prints beneath the ash. Torrin met them at noon with 50 warriors of his own, and for one taut moment it seemed the whole ride might end in exactly the massacre Kor had planned all along. I cannot restore Ardan. Savannah told him. No. I cannot bring back Cade. No. I can stand where I should have stood from the beginning, instead of running from what everyone believed in me. Then stand, Torrin said. Forgiveness isn't promised for it. I didn't come for forgiveness. I came so the next widow doesn't have to. Torrin fell in behind them without another word. At Fort Mercy's gates, Kor's carriage had already arrived. A governor's man called down the accusation, murder of a chief, of a marshal, of council representatives, and Savannah climbed from the wagon to answer it herself. Harris's hand catching her wrist too late to stop her. If I stay hidden, he becomes right, she said, and went, Torrin confessed publicly, to poisoning Ardan under Kor's direction, then seized a rifle and turned it toward Liora in one final, desperate bid to erase the evidence of everything he'd done, and Harris threw his body around the child as the shot went wide, splitting the wagon wheel instead of flesh. In the chaos, Kor ran for the fort's powder magazine, meaning to burn the evidence and blame the fire on the very rebellion he'd invented. Harris and Savannah went in after him through a rear window. Both of them passed the point where either body should still have been standing. You could have ruled both peoples, Savannah said, finding him beside the open barrels. Lantern already raised, I tried. You tried to frighten them into obedience. Fear is the oldest government there is. And love? Love makes people reckless. It got Ardan killed reaching for peace. It's about to get this cowboy killed reaching for you. Kor's eyes flicked to Liora, safe outside in Ruth's arms. Every bond is a weakness someone else can use. No, Harris said, catching the lantern from Kor's failing grip before it could reach the powder. The effort tearing something loose in his chest that made his vision white out for a second. A bond's reason for weakness turns into courage instead of surrender. Kor's blade moved for Savannah's throat in the same instant Torrin crashed through the door and threw himself into its path, taking the knife beneath his ribs instead. Savannah caught Kor's wrist and forced him to the ground as the lantern rolled harmlessly across the stone floor. Ardan would have liked her, Torrin said, dying looking at nothing in particular. Yes, he'd have mocked my final strategy. What strategy? Standing in front of a blade for once, instead of behind one. He'd have called it late, Savannah said. And there was something almost gentle in it. He was irritatingly wise like that. Torrhen's hand found hers as the last of him went out of his eyes. Behind her, Harris finally let himself fall. Spring light came through curtains he didn't recognize at first. And for one confused moment, Harris believed the river and the mesa had both been feverish. Then Liora cried in the next room, small and furious, and he knew none of it had been a dream. "How long?" he asked. When Savannah came in, Liora on her hip in a blue ranch dress altered for broad shoulders and green skin, Ardan's black ring hanging at the child's throat on a cord. 6 weeks. "You have a talent for frightening healers on a schedule, it turns out, Ruth. Threatened to bury you alive if you tried standing without help." They believe her. What happened after the powder house? Kor was convicted. The mining agreement is void. Red Mesa answers to a joint council now, human and Ashfang both. She sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "The elders offered me the regency until Liora is grown. I gave it to Oric instead. Why? Because I spent years believing duty meant becoming whatever everyone needed of me. Commander, widow, heir-bearer, symbol. I want to find out who I am when nobody's hunting me for the first time in my life. And I already know where I want to find that out." "Where?" "Here, your leaking roof. Your stubborn retired mare. Your one grave with 2 names on it. I have nothing grand to offer a chief's widow. You have everything I actually chose," she said. That was never the same thing as grand. She visited Anna and Eli's grave every morning after that, without being asked, and never once acted as if loving Harris required silencing the family that came before her. Harris never asked her to take off Ardan's ring. The dead simply stayed quietly, as part of the house rather than a wound in it. He healed slowly, never regaining full strength in his left arm. On the morning's pain woke him before dawn. Savannah sat beside him without asking him to hide it, the way he'd once sat with her through nightmares of Ardan's name. They married beneath the cottonwoods that summer, the Ashfang rite requiring 2 blades laid side by side, meaning 2 lives that could defend each other without ever becoming one weapon. The human rite requiring rings. Savannah wore Ardan's on a cord and Harris's plain silver band on her hand, and nobody in either ceremony thought that strange. Years later, Liora, 7 now, tall for her age, green-skinned like her mother, with Harris's habit of narrowing one eye when suspicious, asked him why he'd gone into the river that day. Savannah waited by the wagon, pretending not to listen. "I heard someone ask for help," Harris said. "That's all." "At first, were you scared?" "Terrified." "Then why'd you go?" "Because Anna's death had hollowed him out long before that morning. Because a woman had looked up at him from beneath the water as though the world had never once given her kindness without a price attached, and something in him had needed to be the exception to that, just once. Because an unborn child needed someone ordinary to make one impossible decision. And there'd been nobody else standing close enough to the river that day. I went because being afraid didn't make leaving her there right," he said. "Did you know you'd love her?" "No." "When did you know?" "Probably before I was ready to admit it out loud. Somewhere around the 2nd time I growled at a lawman instead of talking to him like a reasonable person. He admitted it very slowly," Savannah called over. "Not looking up from the wagon. I was recovering from a gunshot. You were stubborn. Same symptoms. Most days." Anna still sang badly in the kitchen some mornings, in memory if nowhere else. Ardan still lived in every story Savannah told their daughter by the fire. Cade stayed young forever beside a canyon he never got to leave. Torrhen stood, always, one breath too late in front of a blade that had already found him. None of the losses healed into absence. They simply stopped being wounds and became instead the shape of the family that was left. "Do you regret it?" Savannah asked him that evening, watching Liora climb into the wagon ahead of them. "Any of it?"
"The river?"
"All of it." Harris looked at the old scar tissue along his arm, the ache that never fully left his shoulder. The woman beside him, the child waiting under the wagon's shade. "No. Even the pain." "I regret the pain." "That isn't the same answer." "No," he admitted. "It isn't. He helped her up into the wagon anyway. She raised an eyebrow. She could climb it herself. And they both knew it. Cowboy custom, he said. You invented that. Ancient tradition. As of about 4 seconds ago, she took his hand regardless. The way she'd taken it first, in a flooded river, with 3 rifles pointed at both their backs. And he climbed up beside his family and gathered the reins. Behind them lay the river that had almost taken her. Ahead waited a house that finally held more names than grief had once allowed him to speak aloud. He drove toward it under a widening evening sky and didn't look back. Could you love again without betraying the one you lost? Tell us your answer below, and follow OrcBond Saga for more stories about the bonds that survive when everything else doesn't.